Thank you. Welcome, and thank you for your patience. Thank you for your patience, and thank you especially for the folks who are standing in the back. I apologize. This is a packed room, and for good reason. Welcome to the Center for Brooklyn History. Yes. We are absolutely thrilled to be hosting tonight's conversation about attention, distraction, and the book, The Sirens Call: How Attention Became the World's Most Endangered Resource, with MS Now's Chris Hayes and esteemed social scientist Alondra Nelson. Yeah. Yep. My name is Marcia Eli. On behalf of all of my colleagues here at the Center for Brooklyn History and the Brooklyn Public Library, which we are now a part of, and the library, please applaud the library. We love libraries. And the library's Arts and Culture team, BPL Presents, I get to greet you a little bit tonight. So humankind is distracted, and we should be very concerned. In The Sirens Call, Hayes shines a spotlight on this reality and its outcomes, the clear and enormous profits for big tech, and the clear and enormous transformation of our political state. It's really an honor to host Chris tonight, and I can think of no one more equipped to lead this conversation with him than Alondra Nelson, whose groundbreaking work examines how new and emerging technologies, including platforms and artificial intelligence, shape and are shaped by power and inequality in public life. I want to share that following their conversation, we'll take questions from you. Our ushers will bring mics to you at your seat. So please help us out by standing when you speak so we can see you, well, mostly so they can see you. And please keep your questions brief. I hope as you came in, you saw that The Sirens Call is on sale at the CBH shop in that corner over there. Chris will sign copies later at a table in the front. So now let me tell you a little bit more about our guests before I invite them to the stage. Chris Hayes is the Emmy Award winning host of All In with Chris Hayes on MS Now, and the New York Times bestselling author of A Colony in Motion, in a Nation, glasses off, Twilight of the Elites, and The Sirens Call. He also hosts a weekly podcast titled Why Is This Happening? He lives in Brooklyn with his wife and children. Alondra Nelson is the Howard F. Linder Professor of Social Science at the Institute for Advanced Study, where she founded and leads the Science, Technology, and Social Values Lab. She is the author of award-winning books, including The Social Life of DNA. From 2021 to 2023, she served as the Biden-Harris administration, as acting director of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. Her forthcoming book, Auditing AI, is out later this spring. It is such a great joy to welcome you both back here. I think it's safe to say that you now have our undivided attention. Please help me welcome.
We'll display. Good evening, everyone. Marcia, thank you for that. Always so good to be here. And I'm representing Harlem, so in addition to Brooklyn. Chris, I mean, it's bleak. You know, even just even the news just in the last 12 hours is pretty bleak, and all of it goes through this attention economy that you do such a good job of laying out for us. And so this is such an opportune time to have this conversation because I think your book does such a great job at helping us understand where we are, and I hope that can sort of help us to sort of chart a different course forward. But I want to start with the title and the kind of this very evocative image about the siren. And if you would tell us why the book's called The Sirens Call.
Yeah, I mean, the title draws its name from the chapter of the Odyssey in which Odysseus, probably one of the most famous chapters or canonical events in the Western canon. I just saw an amazing adaptation of Ulysses, James Joyce's sort of quasi-adaptation of the Odyssey at the Public Theater. And, I think people are pretty familiar, but the basics are that Circe tells Odysseus that he's going to come upon this section where the sirens will attempt to lure his ship into the rocks. They will warble him to death, and if he listens, he will pilot the ship into the shoals, and they'll all die. They'll never see home again. And so she gives him a plan, which is to have his crew stuff wax in their ears so they can't hear the sirens, bind him to the mast of the ship, instruct his crew to ignore his imprecations. And sure enough, they go through and he's bound to the mast and he's hearing the lull and he's trying to direct them to pilot towards them, and they can't hear him, they can't hear the sirens, and they safely go past. And I think this notion, in sort of social psychology, we might call that a commitment device, right? So if you start, posting your run times, or you sign up for a half marathon because you're going to have to train for it. If you someone I knew who said who was a smoker and tried to quit smoking said, one thing you can't do is quit smoking in private, right? You cannot secretly quit smoking. The only way that you quit smoking is that you tell people that you're quitting smoking, because that's a commitment device. You then, if you light up around them, people are like, wait, what are you doing? I thought you were quitting. And so there's something, the pathos is so rich in this moment, because it's this war between these different parts of him. There's the part of him that's the pre-hearing the sirens part of him, who knows that this is coming and wants to commit to avoiding death. And then there's the part of him taken over by the siren song in the moment, who is in fact wriggling on the mast. And I think that we all experience life now increasingly like Odysseus wriggling on the mast. There's a part of us that is the part of us that wants to read the novel that we brought on vacation, and there's a part of us that is doom scrolling. And then there's the part of us that puts the phone in the hotel safe so that you then go down just with the novel, so that you bind yourself to the mast so that you'll read and you'll pay attention. And I think there's something profound about the war that represents between different versions of ourselves, different selves, and one that is being exploited relentlessly, extractively, and incredibly lucratively by the platforms.
So you started the book there beautifully, and I think it's so evocative that also the piece just about not being able to stop yourself, knowing better and not being able to stop yourself. And I think all of us feeling, sort of captured in that compulsion in a way that, with kind of quite dire consequences, as you detail. So I wanted to the core argument here that I took away from the book was about, we're not in an information age. We think we're in an information age. We're in an attention age. Yeah. And I just wanted you to kind of get us there, because I think it's in some ways, what's so powerful about the book is that in some ways it's counterintuitive. There's information everywhere, there's data everywhere, data brokers, whole data economy. Why this slice of attention, and why do you think that's more important?
I'm glad you asked that. I should say that this insight really isn't mine. It's fundamentally borrowed. Probably everything in the book is, if I'm being totally honest. But I'm good at stitching things together and synthesizing, I think. So, Herb Simon, who's a brilliant economist, social scientist, writes this paper in the late 1970s, and he's talking about decision making in an organization in an information-rich world, and he just has this profound and true insight, which is that information is actually plentiful. In fact, it's infinitely replicable. If you think about data, here's a great example. It doesn't really change your life that much if 10 firms, 100 firms, 1,000 firms, or 10,000 firms have your data. I don't know how many have my data, but it's a lot, right? And the reason is information is replicable, shareable, right? People can, more than one person can have your address and phone number and thing like that. But attention, fundamentally and definitionally, is finite, right? And the core insight of this Herb Simon paper is that information consumes something, and what it consumes is attention. The more information there is, the more competition there is for the finite resource, which is what are we paying attention to? So if you're a decision maker, you use this example in the paper, if you're a decision maker at the State Department, and you decide we're not getting enough briefing dispatches from our foreign embassies, and they put in teletype machines, and now you're getting 100 a day as opposed to 10. Well, now you have a problem, right? Which is, which of the 100 are you going to pay attention to, and how are you going to decide? And what you need, he says, are mechanisms inside an organization or machines that actually reduce the pull on your attention. Right? There's a machine that could consolidate and summarize those 100 teletypes, right? This idea of the finitude of attention forces you to think about it as the resource that's actually important. So often data is being used to try to figure out what it is about you they can sell you an ad for. But the thing they're actually trying to do, that they're monetizing, is capturing your attention and selling it to someone they're charging for advertising. That's actually the valuable thing. And the more information there is, the more distractions there are, as almost a kind of accounting identity, right? In a supply and demand sense, the more valuable your attention becomes. There's more competition for your attention every moment than there ever has been before. I say in the book, one of the things that dawned on me in the day job I have, which is as a television presenter, is that even when I started my show in 2013, I would think of my competition of like CNN or like, oh, maybe there's a big college basketball game on, right? But now it is quite literally the case that in every single instant of my show, I am competing in that instant against literally every single piece of content that's ever been created in the world. That's not an overstatement. It is, yes, I guess there's some things that are only on Blu-ray or whatever, right? But 90% of movies, TV, films, anything, YouTube shorts, all of that is available in every moment. So what happens is the information increases, but our attention can't increase at the same rate. It's bound, it's finite, it's a resource. It's either going to go here or there, right?
But how do you think about, we also are splitting our attention, right? And so, I'm watching you and I'm on Blue Sky and I've got the podcast in the background. I mean, we are finding ways to make it a less finite resource. And it feels terrible. We're being honest.
So it's a great point. I write about this in the book. There's even some sense early on when there was like a little bit of controversy about putting radios in cars, because people were like, "You're gonna listen to something while you pilot this huge death machine?
It's impossible.
Like,
it's impossible.
You should really focus and not be listening to jazz, while you're driving this car.
Especially not the new Java kind of, abstracts.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yes, when I say finite, I don't think it means that its limits are necessarily fixed in time and place. And one of the things we have seen is that people do have a capacity to expand their attention out. But fundamentally, there's still a bit of choosing. There's also pretty good psychological research that like our performance on cognitive tasks when we're multitasking sinks tremendously. The amount that you're understanding a television show if you're looking at another screen goes down. There's an amazing little detail that was, I think, I forget what magazine, but it was about notes. Showrunners and writers for television, for streamers, were starting to get notes that they had to, make the drama less compelling because they want people to be, everyone's watching it while doing something else. And also the other note they were giving them was they had to constantly be restating the dramaturgical subtext to be like, Jim, I can't stay. My mother died and now I have to go mourn her. Just say the thing that's happening in the plot.
I'm walking out now because you're in the kitchen doing your dishes or something, right?
So that people are able to see it. So there's some degree to which it's expandable. And as I write in the book, there's every incentive for them to expand the supply. Right? So how can you expand the supply of attention? Well, multitasking is one, younger and younger people is another, eating into people's sleeping hours is another, making sure the device is on them at all times is another, right? There's all these ways that you can try to kind of keep expanding the supply, but fundamentally that sense of finitude you're going to hit up against.
So information age to attention age. Do you think it is qualitatively different from industrial age to information age? Are these similar shifts, similar paradigm shifts, bigger, different?
Yeah, I think the transformation is as large. Our transformation into this age, this attention age, is in some senses, I think, as large as the transformation into industrial life. And I think that's particularly true at a subjective level. And the reason I think it's particularly true at a subjective level, like our experience of it, is because you cannot separate the faculty for attention from consciousness itself, free will, dominion over your own mind, and what it means to be a human. Fundamentally, when we talk about what consciousness is, it's the kind of meta-awareness of our own minds, the fact that we can know that we're thinking about something. We can interrupt a daydream, or we can say to ourselves, I'm not sleeping, I'm going to try this new strategy and count sheep, right? The ability to control the flashbeam of thought, focus on this and not that, right? To exert willful control of one's mind is inextricably bound up with attention. We are putting our attention on one thing or not the other. To the degree that gets taken away from us, something very deeply profound about ourselves gets taken away from us. And with that very deep, profound thing being taken away from us, our sovereignty over our minds, our willful embodiment over our own conscious faculties, we experience something that is a profound form of alienation. A thing that should be within us is taken outside of us. And that is the sort of alienation of the wriggling on the mast. And I think that really does suffuse the subjective, qualitative experience of contemporary life of the attention age.
So you've got this interesting dualism in the book, alienation on the one hand, but on the other hand, that attention is sort of relational. So you use this concept of social attention, and that our attention is our struggle with ourselves, but it's also about others, and a kind of mirroring effect in the social world. Will you say a bit about that?
One of the reasons that attention is such a powerful faculty is because of its social aspect and because it can move in different directions. So it's not just that I can pay attention to the stars above, or I can whirl my head around when a car honks because it's about to hit me in the street, but I pay attention to people. I'm paying attention to you, you're paying attention to me, people in this room are paying attention. The fact that attention can be transferred and moved means that it can be used sort of like a currency. It can move in different ways. It can be paid in different directions. That form of social attention is actually the necessary precondition for human life. Human beings are born far, far more helpless as infants than most other mammals. People have seen, small mammals, they can walk very quickly, for instance. It takes humans about 8, 9, 10 months, a year to walk, right? That's not common in the mammal kingdom. All of this sort of falls out of the fact that we need to have these enormous brains and also walk upright, and so we get born very early. And so what is the original primordial attentional technology of the human? The baby's cry, right? Functions as a siren. If you've ever tried to relax or sleep on a long airline flight with a baby crying, right? That baby's cry is A, a way of capturing attention, and B, requires a human to pay attention to the infant. The newborn child must be paid attention to or it perishes. Full stop. Now, the other tricky thing about this thing called social attention is that in every case, this attention is necessary but essentially never sufficient. So when you think about attention from, say, your parents or your caregivers or a lover or a friend or a teacher or a mentor or any of those, you want something more than attention. You want the relational substance of reciprocal respect. You want engagement with your ideas. You want physical affection. You want sex. You want love. You want to be cared for, right? But a social attention, paying attention to another person, is the necessary precondition. And what's tricky about that is sometimes you could mistake one for the other, right? So the classic example of this is a child who has their newborn sibling and starts to act out, right? So they feel that the attentional energy in the household is shifted. They don't know how to overcome it. And so they start seeking out your attention negatively. This is the other distinguishing factor of attention, particularly social attention. Someone screaming in your face in the subway is paying you attention. It's unpleasant, but they are paying attention to you. Someone whispering sweet nothings in your ear is paying attention to you, right? There's a wide set of valence to the way social attention can be paid. Now, that child in that situation, they want love and affection and care. They want to be told they're still very important and all these things. But what they're, at the most primal level, what they're recognizing is this attentional shift. And so they're trying to get it back with this sort of, to just get negative attention. Yeah. And negative attention, I argue in the book, is actually through I think because of the way the platforms function and because of the competition for our attention, has actually gotten more and more important. I think Donald Trump basically became,
right there. I mean, I think, you've got Odysseus, but you've got two other protagonists, antagonists in the book, President Trump and Elon Musk. So, I think, you're very good on President Trump in talking about sort of almost attention as dominance, attention as a kind of domineering, steering, as a form of domination. Yeah. And I think going back to the social attention, I think what I thought was so profound there was that it's a kind of vulnerability, right? That it is our like deepest expression of need, desire, wanting somebody to mirror. And so the domination piece on top of the vulnerability brings us to the bleak moment that we're in now.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, at certain points, I think certain figures with their own particular character makeup, talents, and pathologies sort of meet a certain moment. Napoleon was a really messed up dude, obviously, but the ways in which he was messed up sort of worked out, at least in the short term, for him in post-revolutionary France. Donald Trump's a profoundly and deeply broken person. He has a kind of feral instinct for attention. And, one of his great sort of insights is that, like, if attention matters over everything else because this competition for attention is so fierce, then negative attention can be as useful as positive attention. And most politicians don't think that way. Most politicians would rather be ignored than to have negative attention paid to them. But his big innovation was to realize, like, the old P.T. Barnum thing, as long as you spell my name right? Today's an amazing example. At 3:30, he gave an interview in which he said, the war is basically over and complete, and we've already won. Market surged. At 6 p.m., after markets closed, he did a press conference in which he said, we're going until they surrender. I don't know. Does he believe either one? I don't know. Does he even understand what he's saying? I don't know. Did he manage to grab attention twice in the span of 3 hours? 100%. Is that, should the press have ignored him? Probably not. Is it, it's not trivial when the war ends, actually. So, what the president says matters. It'll be heard by allies. It'll be heard by Iran and Iranian military planners. It'll be heard by Israelis. It'll be heard by our own service members who are in regional bases. This idea, but the other thing I think that's reflected in his obsessive pathological desire for attention, and this is true of Elon Musk, who has the same kind of pathological desire, but not the same genius or talent for it. He just doesn't. He's a vortex of negative charisma.
Yeah, where I would say...
At least.
I will, I've never met President Trump, but I will say, having spent a couple of years in Washington, and this from your show and from other journalism and reporting that you've done. Politicians are deeply charismatic. They are otherworldly in their ability to capture attention. There's something chemical there. Like I had a friend who worked in the Clinton White House and said you knew whether or not he was on the campus, right? Or you like that you just have this almost a kind of magnetism and charisma. And I think, I think that the President Trump has that in addition to kind of wanting to, bludgeon with the sort of abuse of it. And, I think you're probably right about Elon Musk as well. Although there is but he has figured out a way with the capture of Twitter, now X, to control attention. Literally to algorithmically control attention through, compelling his engineers to sort of amplify his, so it's you don't have to have the charisma if you've got the algorithm, yeah?
Yeah, it's like if I were a billionaire and, I've always dreamed it would be amazing to dunk a basketball. I can't dunk a basketball. I can never dunk a basketball. And I just I had my engineers build me a machine I could put on to dunk a basketball. You know, it's like he basically spent whatever $45 billion on this company so that he could get more attention paid to him. You know, it's one of the saddest purchases ever made in human history at some deep level. But yeah, and I don't think he has that. He doesn't have the same feral charisma, but he does have an awareness of the importance of it. Partly because if you go back and look at Tesla, there's a lot of things about Tesla that are genuine engineering feats and genuine organizational feats, but a lot of its success is driven by its attentional salience, its ability to capture people's imagination, particularly as a stock. I mean, its stock price is very, very hard to defend on a kind of PE ratio or whatever kind of accounting you want to do. And so I think both of these men in their own ways who kind of lord over this period in our lives of the attention age are people that have profound appreciations of the value of attention.
So, you know, and the difference between them maybe is that Musk is really an example of how attention is designed, how you can design it into an algorithmic system. And you spend some time in the book actually talking about the design of attention, that it's not, that companies, our platforms are explicitly trying to capture attention and designing all sorts of ways to do this, including, we were talking in the green room about, you know, the sort of propaganda videos that the White House has been sending out that's using gamification, right? So using video games to sort of frame up, you know, what they want to say is happening in Iran right now. But, you know, you take us back to sort of gambling and addiction, slot machines.
Yeah.
So, like, I'd love for you to just say a little bit about the relationship between, I don't know, the sad world of a lonely slot machine and penny slots or something, or nickel slots, and how we get to this and its relationship to the attention economy.
Yeah, there's this great sort of classic work of social science by Natasha Dow-Schill, which is called Addiction by Design, which is her field work on people that design slot machines and use slot machines and where they are in casinos. And it's a fascinating book that I recommend. It's a really easy and great read. So let me take a step back and just say a few things about the sort of baseline of attention here. So you've got social attention. So one of the big things about attention is there's sort of two different faculties attached to it. One is involuntary and one's voluntary. The involuntary one is the most evolutionarily salient. It's the primal one. If someone knocked over a bunch of chairs over there or broke a glass in the back of that room, everyone would immediately pay attention. You don't get a choice about whether you do or not. And in fact, that's the whole point, because you have to have an involuntary faculty for the predator rustling in the bushes or the car that's going to hit you, right? But then we also have the voluntary faculty, which is, well, what do I want to listen to? And these two things are kind of always in tension and at war with each other. Well, if you're in a competitive attentional environment and you want to kind of get people's attention as much as possible, it's really useful to use the involuntary ways of getting attention, right? The news alert on your phone, right? The haptic feedback that pushes, right? You feel the buzz on the phone and you will notice it whether you decide to notice it or not. That's a decision made essentially preconsciously for you by your physiological and neurological wiring. So competitive attention markets will push towards involuntary attention. Think about places that are very intense competitive places. What is Times Square, right? Bright lights that are flashing. What's a casino floor sound and look like, right? This very competitive attentional place in which they're fighting for involuntary attention. So that's one hack in competitive. The other is that, which kind of falls out of this, is that it's much easier to get someone's attention than hold someone's attention. And so the way to think about this is, in this room right now, any single person in the room, if I said you have to get everyone's attention in the room, you could do it. Right? Everyone has done this at like a wedding when you like start, you know, so-and-so is going to make a toast, right? Everyone can do that. That's trivial. Holding attention, if I said to anyone in the room, like, come up here and give us a solid hour of material that people are going to really like, that's a lot harder. Okay? So again, if you're in a competitive attention environment and you're solving for this problem, oftentimes the cheapest, most efficient way to hold someone's attention for a long period of time will to be iteratively grab it via sequential interruption. So the most profitable part of any casino floor are the slot machines. What do slot machines do? People will say it's slot machines for 8 hours or 10 hours or 12 hours. They don't tell a story. It's not Wagner's Ring cycle, right? Over the course of that 8 hours, right? It is an iterative grab. So what is vertical video? Right? It's just a slot machine in the pocket. And it's basically the same insight as to how to outcompete other attentional forms. Now, it doesn't mean that people won't listen to a 3-hour podcast. They will. But, I use this comparison to the way that our sort of systems for food and hunger work, right? Which is that when it comes to food, similar to attention, we have these sort of two faculties. We've got the kind of like biological inheritance we have, which is that basically sugar, salt, fat, right, are very attracted to us because they're very calorically rich. And then we've got all the things that food means, which means that like people eat literally everything under the sun, from like fermented whale flesh to, very, very obscure plants, right? But in the end, if you want to sell something to 1 billion people, you sell Coca-Cola and French fries, right? Which is very efficient forms of catering to that biological thing. Similarly, if you want to basically run a platform for $2 or $3 billion, 2 or 3 billion users, what has developed is you send them vertical video.
So let's talk about, I want to talk about the kind of attentional harms, right? You've been talking a little bit around it. One of them is the sort of addiction, the dopamine hits that we're getting by having to have our attention captured. But it's also about the things that trigger that response that grabs attention. Sexism, racism, white nationalism. And how do you think about the particular, like who's subject to the attentional harms? we're like, so going back to your social attention, you could imagine sort of mapping an ecosystem in which all of us are subject to, having our attention captured and disrupted, but some of us are also the objects of the attention or of the malattention or something, which is a kind of like hard, compound problem, I think, if we're trying to get our attention back.
Yeah, one way to think about this is there an inherent political bias or effect of this form of grabbing attention at scale? And I think there's pretty clearly a right-wing populist valence to the entire experience. And the reason that I would say that is, this is a very old insight. Benjamin Day, who starts the penny press in the U.S. In New York and the New York Sun, is the first person that hires like a courthouse reporter, and they just go down and they tales of murder, rape, assault, lurid tales, right? And the reason is that it's grabbing your threat sensors. So in these competitive environments, and this has been true about the news, right? Does the news have a negativity bias? There's even a cliche in newsrooms, which is that we don't cover the planes that land, right? Have you heard that one? And it actually is really true. Like, for instance, airline safety has gotten just orders of magnitude better in the last 20 or 30 years. And, that's not, there's a negativity bias to news coverage. So that has been sort of supercharged, I think, by the current platforms. A question of are they inherently kind of racist or sexist, I think is an interesting one. Or are they in the hands of people? Are there ways in particular moments? I think the partisan valence can kind of cut both ways. For instance, I think the social networks, I think the platforms, because of that negativity bias, actually end up making incumbency a little more difficult to defend, the status quo, because people are everything sucks. And I wouldn't be surprised. One of the things we've seen, one thing that would fall out of this is a theoretical prediction, is that the incumbency benefit in American politics would start to go away. We're going to have, we've had 3 one-term presidents in a row, which is actually historically fairly rare, and we'll see what happens next. But I think it's a profound question that I don't have a good answer to about these sort of, I think part of what you're saying, which is that the people that are for instance, like the stuff around immigrants that's so disgusting and despicable and also so attentionally salient. Is that inherent to the platforms? Is it inherent to this sort of attentional economy that's been built up around them? Can you, does it just fall out of the kind of threat stuff?
Yeah, or is the attention economy differently experienced?
Yes, by different people. Yeah,
differently distributed, differently,
and different harms.
Yeah.
I think that's a great question. I do think about this a lot in terms of particularly immigration, because it has been such a common theme of reactionary populist politics across the world. B, a common theme of sort of propaganda, bigotry, and calumny on social media networks. I mean, these sort of kind of whipping up fear and hatred of some sort of ethnic other invader has been an incredibly common pattern across platforms, across polities, across even like the developed and the developing world, right? Like we're not even talking like, this has been true with like Afghan refugees in Pakistan. It's been true with Venezuelan refugees in Colombia and Brazil. It's been true obviously in Europe. It's been true in the US. So it's been true in lots of different places. And I do think there's some sort of deep connection between that kind of lizard brain attentional technology and that form of politics.
So let's talk about AI. I mean, the book came out a year ago. It's now wonderfully in paperback and still really important and relevant. And you were obviously writing it in the emergence of ChatGPT and all of that conversation. And I think there would have been there's a story about the attention economy that's about fomenting protest or riots using WhatsApp, or what we know about Facebook and the Rohingya, and lots of other kinds of social media platform examples. But it seems that AI is layering potentially something else on that. And so how are you thinking a year out even from, how the technology's changed in the last year about attention and AI?
So I find, at my moments of maximum anxiety, I find myself comforted by the sense of radical uncertainty I have about the future. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. So like, why even stress about it? Like, it feels like, it's like, I don't know, maybe we'll get nuked.
You're a good therapist. I gotta get where you are.
Like the uncertainty seems so radical that I'm able to kind of talk myself. I always think about this moment when I remember having this moment where I was up late at night in February of 2020, stressing out about how much travel I was about to do that spring for the primaries and how much childcare and how much I was going to be away from my kids. And I remember a sleepless night about that. And I always go back to that night, which is like, that I probably could have slept well that night. It turned out I wasn't going anywhere for a while. I was going to see my kids a lot. So the reason I say all that with AI is like, I do feel radically uncertain about what it does. A few things I would note. One is to go back to the Herb Simon insight, right? What's an actually useful thing for AI to do? Well, a useful thing for it to do is to act as one of these information processing systems that reduces your attentional needs. Yes. So do a lit review or summarize these things, right? There are huge dangers in that, of course. Does it summarize it well? Is it biased in what it summarizes? Is it biased in who it values and who it doesn't, who it listens to and who it doesn't? There's also the fact that for every technology AI is good at preserving your attention and synthesizing, it's good at generating lots of garbage. So you end up with a spam problem. People, I don't know if people have been talking to, but journals are getting more submissions than ever before. All of applying to jobs and hiring jobs is now getting AI-ified on both sides, right? So you've got this like crazy thing where it's like, we're going to generate a ton of AI spam and then use AI to like distill down what's good. And I said in the book, it's a little like the late era of the steroids era in baseball where like the pitchers and the batters were both juiced out of their minds. And you're a little like, maybe you guys both could get off drugs and have this same interaction en natural. So there's a weird thing happening, which is like, it's a really good spam generator and also a pretty good like condenser and synthesizer. So there's that's one part of this. The other thing I think is fascinating is the Wall Street Journal or New York Times had the piece about, we've heard about ChatGPT and psychosis and the people that have been led into everything from relapsing to suicide, horrible stories. And a lot of that comes from the fact that there was a change to the model to make it more solicitous and more kind of social, like to lavish more social attention on the user.
Yes. I mean, I think I hadn't thought about like sycophancy as that, but
Yeah.
I think it is a kind of
oh my
social,
God,
it's a sickly social
That's
attention.
such a good idea. Yes. You know what? You're brilliant.
Chris.
You're so smart. And what they found was that they massively juiced
Yes.
the amount of time people were spending on the chatbot. Because it's nice to have a machine tell you how smart you are, or it's nice to have anyone. I mean, the other thing about this that I think is so profound is just the fact that because social attention is so elemental to us, that it's a powerful drug to come up with a synthetic for it. Like, every drug that works on a human, right? Cannabis, methamphetamine, opium, right? It works on a human because there is an endogenous receptor in the brain that binds to the chemical, right? That's why a drug works, right? It's like coming up with like social fentanyl of like, well, here's a synthetic version of that thing that will go in and bind to the same receptors that are there for receiving social attention. And we can charge you $20 a month for it. And I know, like, there's a lot of people spending a lot of social time with the chatbots. Like, a lot. And I don't want to sound like some weird, judgy, middle-aged dad, which I am. But I don't think it's that good. I think it's bad. I think,
So, okay, so let's talk about democracy and how democracy is a social fentanyl. I mean, sort of what are the infrastructures? What are the policies? I mean, what are we going to do? So I think one is solidarity who are the other things, other activities, practices, people that can offer a mirror to you that provides that recognition, which is, as you describe beautifully in the book, is just a basic human need and function, right? There's nothing inherently negative about that. So, how do we kind of thread together back our communities, I think is one way of thinking about it. And what do you advocate? I mean, you end the book with a chapter called Reclaiming Our Minds, that's a mix of sort of policy and personal practice. Mm-hmm. How do you think about how we do that social fentanyl?
I mean, I think the first place to start is to be self-aware enough to say, like, I recognize that since the inception of American democracy or democracy, people have been complaining that like everyone's getting dumber and people's attention spans are getting shorter. I think there's actually like pretty good evidence that like we're like people across the world are like actually getting dumber. Let me just say it in sort of less crass terms. To the extent that we can measure this with longitudinal surveys of the same sorts of tests given to people across a variety of places in the world, they seem to be going down. I don't think it's a crazy hypothesis that the particularly short form video as the means by which people interact with the world is actually like eroding our cognitive function. I would not claim that that is like definitely true, and I would also leave open the possibility that 20 years from now that looks crazy and that was it was a weird moral panic. But as a hypothesis with like some early evidence, I don't think it's crazy. I also think that like obviously we've got a real problem with the information environment, and the discursive spaces that democracy happen in. I try to do my part on that, like as practice every day. But we need lots of different models of information and media that are not all just routed through the same platforms. Like that's one thing. Like this monoculture we're headed towards is really dangerous. Just like the idea that like everyone's going to get everything via the platforms and the platform algorithm is going to be the decider about the information that flows into everyone's eyeballs is nuts. Even if we have 3 platforms that are competing against each other, and one of which is bought by the president's allies. In terms of restoring democracy, like that point about solidarity, I think is key. And I think that like all sorts of different forms of rebellion against this order, whether that's in social habit and practice, the things happening in schools, people convening with each other, I think is like profoundly important and has never been more important. To try to stitch back together alternate means of finding out about the world, finding out about our neighbors and the people that we live in this neighborhood or city or country or world with is really important. And then there's going to have to, I don't know the answer to this question, but like the tech companies are too big and too powerful, like full stop. They are obviously, it is the robber barons all over again. There is real tension between what it means to have a functioning democracy and the current political economy of the country.
Yeah. I mean, my kind of probably minority opinion about the, recent fracas with Anthropic and the Department of Defense, I mean, is exactly your point that the companies are too big and powerful. Because I think why then do you have to overcompensate? Like you just in the contract.
Right.
But I think ultimately the product is the best product. I mean, Dario Amodei, the founder and leader of Anthropic, did an interview with CBS News where he basically said, we're not selling to the federal government the, commercial brand. We're building something stronger. So it's like Opus 5.5 or something that they've got embedded in the United States sort of national security systems. So like the product is really good. And so you can't, I think it was like this domineering, like we're going to sort of bludgeon you with the nuclear option to stay and to make you sort of let us use the product the way we want. And, I think the thing that's about this technological moment is that so many of the technologies that have been powerful before, including the internet, were developed by the government. Transformer models and things that follow them are discovered by the private sector. So the government no longer has that special purview on the technology. And the companies are not just powerful because they have, endless money. They're powerful because they have endless knowledge, including vis-a-vis the federal government. So we're in a kind of complicated, tricky space.
Yeah, and I found that moment fascinating because it forced me to kind of wrestle with my own intuitions on this. Because at one level you think, well, it's crazy that we have people developing these tools completely outside of regulation or democratic control. Like the sort of version of this that Larry Lessig, at Harvard law professor, said to me, it's like, imagine we had the nuclear arms race, but just a bunch of private companies. And they were just like working on the labs. They're like, oh, we're getting pretty close. Maybe like, our new model. Oh, we blew that one up in the Pacific. Look at that. Now, that sounds insane, but he's like, these are, his view. I don't know. Again, I remain agnostic on all this about how powerful they are, but these are really powerful tools. So at one level, you're like, that is crazy. There should be some form of democratic control. But then it's like, when the rubber hits the road, is democratic control in the form of Pete Hegseth? That is a tough bullet for me to bite. On seriously, because it's like, okay, yeah, there should be more government control or more government representation or regulation. And it's like, look at our government. Who do I want? I don't particularly trust.
If the regulation is like, no, mass surveillance is great,
right?
As are lethal autonomous weapons.
Yeah. So yeah, I find all of that pretty harrowing. I do think that I guess the last thing I would say on AI. And this is, again, an insight I'm stealing from a number of people who have put it in these terms. I do think it's useful to think about there's basically 2 possible paths. Because the spend right now is historically, there's not a lot of precedent. Railroads, basically the railroad build out maybe in terms of percentage of GDP. There's basically 2 possibilities. One is that it's a bubble that bursts. And that bursting is pretty seismic and has some real effects. It also means that the technology doesn't go away. There was an internet bubble that built, and there was actually a huge railroad bubble that burst and actually had an enormously consequential Great Depression in the early 1890s. So that's one option. And the other option is the capital expenditure is actually justified by the fact that the companies grow their revenue by a faster pace than any company in the history of American capitalism has. And if that turns out, that's pretty disruptive also, right? Because if it's a correct investment and they can grow revenue at that rate, it means that they are dislocating a lot of labor because the value proposition is that you could use our model and not hire your first year associate. So there's no way to kind of come out of this without disruption. Like the thing's either going to blow up, in which case we get a lot of reverberations and disruption, or the boosters are right and it blows up in a way that's going to have a lot of disruption.
I think that's right. Well, I think we're going to go to questions now, so folks could get their questions ready. I think also just important to remember that in this debate with Anthropic and the Department of Defense, like that's a really low bar, right? If our red lines are autonomous weapons and mass surveillance of the American public, we need to really raise the bar, including to some of these attentional harms, right, that we've been discussing, that you mentioned. So, all right, questions?
Thank you, Chris. Oh, my first reaction to AI is, oh my God, if we put these machines in charge, we're all screwed. But then when I see who leads ChatGPT and Anthropic, and they strike me as progressive, perhaps left people with truly benevolent instincts, another part of me thinks, oh, maybe if we put AI in charge, the world would become a better place. If AI replaced judges, there would be better decisions. You see where I'm going.
Yeah.
But do you see any credence to that optimistic view of it?
I'm glad you asked the question. I mean, here's an example of that I wrestle with, which is automated driving, which is a version of AI, right? 20 years ago, we didn't think computers would be able to drive, and now I think there's like pretty good evidence, and we actually have like public evidence on this, that Waymo is causing less accidents than human drivers. Partly, that's just because like Waymo is never drunk or high or distracted on the phone. No, seriously, right? Like if you take that right off the top of human drivers, and your comparison set was, non-teenage, non-inebriated, non-distracted drivers, you'd have a lower accident rate. But that's an example where, we've got some empirical data, and it looks like there's maybe a decent case that like robot drivers are better than human drivers. And to the tune of like, actually a lot of like pretty bad injuries to human beings. And I don't know what to do with it. I did a podcast about it, but like that is an example where it seems possible that some automated version of something will have better outcomes than a human version.
Yeah, but I think the interesting the interesting thing about that data is that people are more willing to accept when the accidents do occur. If it's a human, there's more empathy for the human than there is for the robot. Like, we expect kind of infallibility, and we want an explanation, right? Like, you want your Waymo to say, I was distracted, or I miscalculated, or whatever. And, having that be a human at least leaves open the possibility of explanation.
On the second thing, just about the sort of the personal judgment or politics of these individuals, I mean, there's a little bit of this thing with it's Gollum in the ring. I mean, everyone is themselves until they get the ring. Yes. And then once they have the ring, they're very different. Then other people look at them with the ring and they're like, I'm going to start an AI company because that guy has been corrupted by the ring. And then like they get the ring and they're like, it's like we've like seen this now like 3 times in the history of AI development. I do think it's just too much power.
Hi, Chris. In Tim Wu's book, which I imagine you're familiar with, The Attention Merchants, and he goes back to, he starts off talking about like traveling medicine shows, goes into just the socioeconomic things that you bring up, like the railroad industry, and he goes on to, it was written to 2017, so I can't say how far it goes past this, but he goes into, Time Warner and AOL and that failed merger. So I was just curious if you're familiar with that, but he also, I forgot until you brought it up, and as people may not know, he's the law professor who came up with the term and the concept of net neutrality, which fits into this whole thing. But as you were talking about technology, I recall that his subsequent book was titled "Who Owns the Internet?" So
Yeah, so Tim Wu's Attention Merchants is a great book. The Benjamin, he just got a great part on Benjamin Day in there and the penny press, and he also got there's an amazing riff on the blight of posters in Paris, which is a fascinating look at what happens when you don't regulate attention, which is that like briefly Paris was like completely covered with bill posters and everyone hated it and they regulated. This point about net neutrality I think is important for this reason. So one of the things that I think is weird about our current moment is that we've sort of slid into a situation which we take it for granted that all internet space is enclosed and private. Like, think about your life, right? You move in your life through public and private spaces, on sidewalks, on streets, and subways, and that used to be the case of the internet, right? The metaphor of the information superhighway, right? What is a highway, right? It's a place that is publicly owned and open to all, right? That everyone gets to go on the highway as long as you have a driver's license, and you can go to where you want to go. And then you get off and you go to a private place. Now, the entirety of the internet functionally is contained in the platforms. Yeah. It's like enclosure. And one of the things I talk about in the book is I really do think we need non-commercial spaces to be rebuilt on the internet. This idea that you can just put up a website, and that website people can navigate to was a profound and revolutionary idea. And now as soon people put up an Instagram page. I mean, there's restaurants that don't even have websites. They just have their social media handles, which again, 47-year-old I am, is like, my day, but I think this point, part of the future that I would want to see is a future in which it's both the case that the platforms are being their size and scope and power is being reduced, and we're reintroducing new means of competition, but also that we're regenerating a civic internet, a non-commercial internet, an internet that is not fully contained within one of these companies.
Other questions?
Yes, I have a question. Thank you so much. Actually, this kind of goes to that point. I was curious about how you're experiencing or seeing like Gen Alpha specific, especially knowing that they are growing up fully not only in the iPads and device, but now are also using AI on their daily lives, and they're about to go into the workforce. I'm super curious to hear how you feel. Do you feel more hopeful for this generation? Like, I see that they have hidden language. They have ways that they use emojis and language online that is so we can't understand it as like millennials or older, like boomers and so forth. But like, I am so curious to hear what your thoughts are. Do you feel more hopeful, or do you feel like they're going to be more at risk, given that they're a little bit more aware of the internet's?
It's a really good question. So in some ways, I do think that Gen Alpha and folks that are younger are more evolved and habituated to deal with these attentional issues, right? Like, and I say this with love to all the boomers in the room, zero insult needed here. But like, it has been my experience that older folks, like every one of their notifications is turned on their phone. And it like all the time. And younger people have like very complex systems for dealing with that. I think there's also a little bit of thing that happens in this discourse, which is that we put our own anxieties onto the kids. So like my favorite example is when you're a parent and you're sitting there and you're like scrolling on a Saturday morning at coffee, and like your kid comes up and they're like, can I watch something on my iPad? And I'm like, no. Play with a toy or something, come on, yeah. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of like displaced anxiety where it's like, we're the ones, we're all in this. It's not just the kids. So there are certain ways I think they're more resilient. I also think that like the thing that's happening in schools is 100% great, which is getting phones out of classrooms. It's insane to me that that didn't happen earlier. I'm going to give you a very stodgy answer on AI. It strikes me as just malpractice to have kids using AI, particularly to generate to write. I got a second grader. Like, I don't give her the calculator to do her arithmetic problems. We have calculators, and at some point in her life, she'll use a calculator, and she won't. Like, I don't sit there and multiply 2 3-digit numbers, but I did learn how to do it. And, you know, I think we're going to have to come up with a way, particularly about writing. I think we're going to have to come up with a way of thinking about writing the way that we encountered this with math. Because all the math stuff, actually, all that stuff is solve problems, right? Like, you get further enough in math and you are just using computer programs to do a lot of it or to shorthand it and all this stuff. But you do have to actually like learn how to figure out why cosine is what it is and go through all the steps of trigonometry and go through all of calculus. And then you start using these programs. You know, we have sophisticated enough robots that I could right now buy a robot that I send to the gym to work out for me. Yeah, it's just not, I don't think, why would I do that? Like, it kind of destroys the whole point. So I do think that like on writing specifically, we're going to have to come up with a solution that forces students to learn how to write. And I think about this all the time. Like, I was a pretty prepared student. I wasn't like a real like last minute procrastinator. But, you know, if you give, to go back to where we started with the Sirens, if you give like a hungover 19-year-old who's got a 10-page paper due a magical thing that could write the paper in the next 2 hours, in the next 2 minutes, like, yeah, that's a lot of temptation to resist.
Yeah, I mean, I would also say I've been encouraged by the kind of analog things that Gen Alpha has been doing, like using film cameras and flip phones, and there's this, I think subculture that's really about kind of using, these kind of technologies of the past that are less connected and less, attentional. So I'm encouraged by their wisdom with that as well.
Hi, Chris. First of all, saying that Elon Musk is the vortex of negative charisma is one of the most fire statements I think I've heard in a long time, and I'm stealing it. So, just brilliant. What do you think of, because I think it's related to like the social attention and social currency, the whole personal brand thing. Like, you have to develop your brand. And that has driven me mad because I'm not Nike. I'm not Grubhub. So I'm a person. How do you feel, or do you feel that like social attention leads into that as far as like the commodification of self? Just as far as personality. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I would distinguish between two things, right? So it's just always been the case, I think will always be the case, that like social attention and social status and desirability are always going to be kind of bound up in very complex things we do in competition and dominance with other people. Like that, we've had various versions of this, and the specific form that it takes in the way that platforms monetize attention and social attention, I think 100% leads to a profoundly perverse sense of self-marketing and the monetization of yourself as a brand for that purpose. And I think it's really, it feels very ethically corrosive. I think it also just like, and I say this as kind of a, probably my least favorite feature about myself is that I'm a show off. That I like attention. I don't think it's a great thing that I want to like super cultivate. But I have it, and it is part of me, and it sort of led me to do the kind of things I do, and I enjoy my job very much. But I I also don't think it's great to create an incentive structure with like the people that are the most pathologically attracted to that, like rise, if that makes sense. Like, I'm just not like, is that really what we should select for? I'm not sure that's what we should select for. And so yes, the degree to which just even the like monetary incentives of how the platforms function are constantly producing a set of like countable metrics about your own reach, popularity, all these things, I think is just like incredibly insidious. So here's I think an example that I give in the book. I talk in the book about group chats. And the reason I think group chats are so vital and important and interesting is that the first part of that answer I gave, which is that like people can be really weird about social attention, is true in group chats. Like people side text people about the people that are saying it, and then there's like another spin-off group chat, and there's like, but like all of that is just recognizably human. The specific like metric-oriented way that social media has you build followers, I think is something different. And I think the difference is that group chats, for whatever pathologies they can embed, and they can, are not monetized. Like, the group chat is the last non-monetized part of the internet. And it's also not with strangers. You're just like, it's the original form of connect. You're just talking to people you know. And to me, it's the best part of the internet by far. Like, texting with my college friends on Halloween where we show each other our kids' costumes, that rules. That's awesome. Like, that was kind of the original thing they designed Facebook for, right? Texting with my high school friends who I'm still super close with, like during, a playoff basketball, or like planning a trip, like all that stuff is great. And the reason is no one is selling my attention. No one's like, that there is no metric there. The technology is existing basically for us to communicate with each other and not to do exactly the thing I think that you're pointing out, which I think does get really perverted, and I think gets back to the point I was making before, which is you need more non-commercial spaces of interaction.
We have time for just one more question, which will be over here. And then afterwards, I'm going to bring Chris to the front, and he'll sit at the table, and I appreciate your help letting me get him there. So one last question.
What do you think about legacy media outlets using vertical video and some of the other strategies that tech companies use to capture attention?
I love this question because I'm really living it right now. We're doing a lot of vertical video. And again, it's a strange thing because, what's that? Like, so short videos that are uploaded to either Reels, TikTok, or YouTube Shorts, which are the three big platforms. And I feel so conflicted about it because at one level, it's weird to take a product that we have some control over the platform of, which is our network, and give it to these companies to try to monetize it there. And I think this devil's bargain has been the demise of many a form of media. At the same time, it is the case that like it will reach people that it wouldn't otherwise reach. So I did a 2-minute video the other day about an Iranian ship that we sank off the coast of Sri Lanka. An American submarine sank it. We think about 100 Iranian sailors died. And the short background is that it turned out that ship had just participated in a joint military exercise parade in India that we were also invited to, that we knew about, where a bunch of, and most of the people on the ship they're banned. And also as a condition of participating in this exercise, the ship had to be unarmed. And we, as the Americans, knew that because we too had been invited to the same exercise. We participated in the first part, we pulled out, and then we sank this ship off the coast of Sri Lanka, many thousands of miles away from the battle, the theater of battle. So I did a short video on that because I thought no one really knows this story, and it got squeezed out of the show. It's got 3.5 million views on Instagram, and about as many on TikTok and YouTube Shorts. So that I feel like, okay, well, I did something worthwhile here. Like, this is an important story. But I will also say there is this crazy slot machine thing that happens where you upload a video and you're like, is this one going to go? Like, do I get 3 cherries here? And then like you'll do something you think is good, and then it doesn't go anywhere. Then you toss something off, and you really feel like you're a rat being conditioned in a maze. Like there's some like I'm doing scratch off lotteries here, and it's that hit when it's like, oh, it worked. I want to buy another ticket, which is what they want you to do because they want you to upload to their platform. So I don't have a succinct answer, but I feel pretty complicated about it.
Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you. That was
stories like
wonderful.
that.
Really. Alondra Nelson, ladies and gentlemen. That was really great. Thank you.